Elara Jennings thought the chapter with her ex-husband Richard had ended 15 years ago, closed, forgotten, filed under what could have been. So when the lawyer called to tell her she'd inherited a mansion in Vermont from the very man who'd once broken her heart, she assumed it was some mistake. But curiosity, and maybe a sliver of unresolved grief, led her to Oak Haven Manor. What she found wasn't just an empty house filled with cobwebs and regrets. 7 children were already living there. They didn't look like Richard. They didn't even look like each other. But they all called him Mr. Richard. And they all claimed the house was theirs. Confused and shaken, Elara stumbled into a reality more bizarre than any fiction. Richard, the man she once loved, had secretly created an underground sanctuary for lost and abused kids. No social workers. No official adoption papers. Just him, his secrets, and now, her. But Richard's entitled cousin isn't about to let that estate, or its secrets, go unchallenged. So what happens when a woman grieving the family she never had is suddenly asked to protect the one she never expected? That's the real beginning of this story. And what follows might just break your heart, and then piece it back together. Elara Jennings had made peace with quiet disappointment. At 52, she lived a modest, predictable life in a sleepy town just outside Portland, Maine. She worked as a reference librarian, one of those people who still believed in the smell of old books and handwritten notes in the margins. Her evenings were filled with chamomile tea, dog-eared novels, and the soothing hum of classical radio. It was not a bad life. Just unfinished. 15 years earlier, her world had fractured when her marriage to Richard Jennings ended with the sharpness of a slammed door. Their story had been one of hope, at first, a whirlwind romance in their 30s, filled with big dreams, including the dream that had never come true, a child. After years of failed IVF treatments, devastating miscarriages, and the emotional toll of a shared grief that neither could articulate, they broke apart, not in anger, but in silence. They hadn't spoken since the divorce. So when Elara received a call from a law firm in Vermont, saying she was named the sole heir to Richard's estate, she laughed. Out loud. It had to be a mistake. She hadn't seen or heard from him in over a decade. She hadn't even known he'd moved to Vermont. But the voice on the other end was polite and firm. It's not a mistake, Ms. Jennings. Mr. Jennings' will is clear. You are the legal inheritor of Oak Haven Manor. She hung up the phone with trembling hands, her heart pounding in a way she hadn't felt in years, not from fear, but from something older. A ghost. A ripple in time. The next morning, after a sleepless night, she packed a small bag, rented a car, and headed west. As the miles ticked by, so did the questions. Why would Richard leave her anything? Why now? What was Oak Haven Manor? The name sounded like something from a Gothic novel, grand, eerie, distant. Not like Richard. Not the man who once brought her wildflowers from roadside stands and cried beside her in fertility clinics. As she passed the Vermont state line, the landscape shifted, rolling green hills, covered bridges, ancient trees leaning protectively over winding roads. The GPS led her deeper into nowhere. And then, there it was. Oak Haven. The manor stood like something out of another century, stone walls draped in ivy, windows tall and proud, an air of forgotten grandeur hanging over it like mist. Elara pulled into the gravel drive, her little rental car sounding cartoonishly out of place. The house loomed above her, silent and watchful. Her heart ached with confusion. This wasn't just a property. It was a statement. A monument. Why had Richard bought this? Why had he kept it a secret from her? And most of all, why had he left it to her? The oak front door groaned open when she pushed it. Not locked. Not quite welcoming either. Inside, dust motes danced in the sunbeams streaming through high windows. The foyer was cavernous, its mahogany floors whispering echoes of lives she hadn't known existed. A grand staircase spiraled up into shadow. Faded oil paintings lined the walls, nothing of Richard. No pictures. No warmth. She stepped cautiously into the space, calling out, "Hello?" And then, footsteps. Small. Light. Followed by whispering. Her blood froze. That was when she saw them. 7 children. 7 pairs of eyes peering at her from the end of a long corridor like ghosts from a dream. They ranged in age from maybe 4 to 16. One boy, tall, serious, protective, stepped forward. "Who are you?" he demanded. "This isn't your house. This is ours." Mr. Richard said so. Mr. Richard. Elara's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't heard him called that since, never, actually. That's not what she called him. That wasn't her Richard. But apparently, it was someone else's. 7 children. In her ex-husband's house. Claiming it as theirs. And just like that, every answer she thought she had unraveled. Richard had lived an entire life she never knew existed. A life with secrets. A life with children. A life without her. But why leave it all to her now? Grief and anger collided in her chest, along with something more dangerous, hope. Not for reconciliation. Not even for clarity. But maybe, just maybe, for purpose. For something unfinished finally making sense. Elara hadn't come to Vermont looking for closure. But the house, and the children inside it, were about to reopen everything. And this time, the story wouldn't be about loss. It would be about legacy. And what you do when the family you never had, suddenly finds you. The silence inside Oak Haven was strange, not the peaceful kind, but the expectant kind, like a breath being held. Elara stepped farther into the manor, her shoes making soft, apologetic clicks on the hardwood floor. She wandered into a grand hallway, lined with dusty portraits and time-worn sconces. The place didn't feel abandoned. It felt paused. Like someone had just stepped out of the room and might return any second. She moved deeper into the house, heart thudding harder with each creak of the floorboards. Then, there it was again. That sound. Footsteps. Soft, hurried. And then whispers, hushed but urgent. "Is someone there?" she called, her voice sharp and clear. No answer. Just a creak. Then another. She followed the sound into what must have once been the drawing room. Faded velvet drapes sagged against tall windows, and a grand piano sat silent in the corner, its keys covered in dust. The room was beautiful in that decaying, antique kind of way. But it wasn't empty. 7 children stood clustered near the fireplace like startled animals frozen mid-flight. Their clothes were mismatched, their hair slightly wild, but their eyes, those eyes were sharp, wary, and filled with something that took Elara's breath away, fear. The oldest boy stepped forward. 16, maybe 17, with jet black hair that curled over his brow and a defensive set to his jaw. He stood like a shield in front of the others. "Who are you?" he asked, not rudely, but not kindly either. "Why are you in our house?" Elara blinked. "Your house. This is Oak Haven," he said. "Mr. Richard said it would be ours. Forever." It was the name, Mr. Richard, that made the air change. Like someone had opened a window inside her ribcage and let in a chill. Her ex-husband had always been just Richard to her. But to them? He was something else. A presence. A promise. "I'm Elara," she said slowly. "Elara Jennings. Richard was my ex-husband. He passed away 2 weeks ago. I was told he left this estate to me." A ripple passed through the children. One of the girls, maybe 10, clutched her little sister's hand tighter. Another, a bookish boy with glasses nearly too big for his face, stepped forward hesitantly. "Mrs. Petrov told us someone might come," he said. "But we didn't think it would be you." "Mrs. Petrov?" Elara echoed. "She brings us groceries," the older boy answered. "Checks on us. She's kind of like a grandmother, I guess. Then, narrowing his eyes, he asked again, "Why are you here now?" "I just came to understand," Elara said honestly. "To see this place for myself. I didn't even know Richard owned it. He never spoke about it. He never mentioned any of you." The boy's expression darkened. "Figures," he muttered. "He didn't talk about you much either." They stared at each other, two halves of a man's divided life. Two histories that were never meant to intersect. And yet, here they were, standing in the same crumbling room. The smallest child, a girl no older than 5, peeked out from behind the boy's legs. Her eyes were impossibly large and round, filled with a silent question, "Are you going to make us leave?" Elara's heart clenched. "Would you like something to eat?" the bespectacled boy asked suddenly. "I mean, we don't have much. Just bread and cheese." The oldest boy shot him a look but said nothing. Then, with the resignation of someone much older than he should be, he added, "Fine. Come to the kitchen. But don't touch anything." It was the barest hint of trust, but it was something. The kitchen was aged but enormous, dominated by a scarred oak table and mismatched chairs. The children moved like gears in a well-worn machine. One retrieved plates, another fetched juice, two more laid out cheese and bread with the precision of ritual. They did not speak much. They just functioned. "Do you all live here?" Elara asked gently as she took a seat. "For now," the older boy said. "Richard promised we could stay. He said it was our home." "I believe him," said a girl who looked around 14. "He didn't say stuff he didn't mean." "And you are?" Elara asked, trying to soften the tension. "Leo," the boy answered, his voice like gravel. "That's Marcus. Clara and Chloe. Serafina. Finn. And Lily." He motioned to each one. "We're not all related, but we're family." "Did Richard, was he your father?" "No," Leo replied. "Not by blood. But he found us. Each of us. He brought us here." "Why?" she asked, bewildered. "To give us a second chance," Marcus said simply. "Because no one else did." The words hit harder than Elara expected. She looked around at their faces, young, guarded, too old for their age. These weren't bad kids. They were just survivors. Of what, she couldn't yet say. But she could feel the pain in the way they sat, the way they watched her like she might be the next thing to vanish. "How long have you been here?" she asked. "Different times," Serafina murmured. "Leo's been here the longest. Almost 4 years. And Richard took care of you?" "He came when he could," Chloe said. "He was sick near the end," Leo added, voice soft now. "But he always came back. Always. Until he didn't." Elara swallowed the lump rising in her throat. What had Richard been doing all these years? Why hadn't he told her? Was this his way of healing after their divorce? Creating the family they never could? The thought was unbearable. Then, from the other side of the table, Lily's voice, small and unsure, rose above the hush. "Are you going to make us leave?" Elara turned toward her, every instinct screaming not to cause more damage. Not to be another adult who broke a promise. She bent down, met Lily's eyes. "No," she said. "I'm not here to take anything from you. I just didn't know. But now I do. And I want to understand." Lily stared at her a moment longer, then nodded solemnly. For the first time in years, Elara felt a shift deep inside her chest, an old grief being reshaped into something new. Not closure. But maybe, the beginning of a second chance. The next morning, Elara returned to Oak Haven with a trunk full of groceries and a head full of questions. The kitchen had felt too empty, the pantry too bare, and she couldn't shake the way Lily's voice trembled when she asked, are you going to make us leave?" She hadn't answered lightly. Now, stepping through the front door with arms full of paper bags, she was surprised to see Leo already waiting. He opened the door before she could even knock. "You came back," he said, voice caught between suspicion and relief. "I said I would," Elara replied, brushing past him gently. "And I brought real breakfast." The scent of pancakes soon filled the kitchen, mixing with the low hum of children setting plates, pouring juice, moving like clockwork. For a moment, it felt normal. Domestic. As if Elara had always belonged in this house, at this table, with these kids. But the questions were still there, unspoken, sharp. That silence broke when the front door creaked open again and an older woman stepped inside. Sharp eyes. Worn hands. A no-nonsense scarf tied over gray hair. "You must be the ex-wife," she said without greeting. "Mr. Richard said you might come." Elara stood. "You're Mrs. Petrov?" "Yes." "I check on the children. Bring food. Make sure the boiler doesn't explode." She glanced around. "You've been cooking?" "I didn't think bread and cheese was quite enough." Mrs. Petrov's eyes softened, but only slightly. "He knew he was dying," she said abruptly. "Cancer. Bad kind. He asked me to watch the children if he couldn't anymore." "Did he know it was that serious?" "Longer than he let on." Elara sank into a chair. "Were these his children?" Mrs. Petrov let out a sharp laugh. "His? No. Not by blood. But by choice?" "Absolutely. Each one." "Then who are they?" Elara whispered. Mrs. Petrov looked over her shoulder, making sure none of the children were eavesdropping, then leaned in. "He found them," she said quietly. "One by one. From the streets. From homes that weren't homes. From the cracks in the system. They were broken. Forgotten. He gave them this place." Elara's world tilted slightly. Why didn't he do it legally? Adoption, foster care, something? "He tried," she said. "But you know how that goes. Paperwork. Delays. Red tape. The system separates them, puts them in homes that don't care. He couldn't watch that happen again. So, he just took them?" "He saved them," Mrs. Petrov corrected. "There is a difference." Elara didn't answer. Her mind was reeling. Richard, her quiet, bookish ex-husband, had lived a secret life as some kind of rogue guardian angel? How did it start? "Leo," Mrs. Petrov said, pouring herself tea. "That boy was the first. Living under a bridge at 12. Foster care had failed him 3 times. Richard found him, brought him here. Said it would be temporary. Then came Marcus. Then Serafina. And the twins. And on and on." She paused. "He built something here, Elara. Not just a house. A family." Elara stood, walking to the window. Her eyes settled on the swing set in the overgrown backyard, on the drawings taped to the fridge, on Leo pouring milk for Finn without being asked. A family. That was what Richard had created. Not in the way she expected. Not with her. But still, real. And now, impossibly, it was hers to protect. "Is this even legal?" Elara asked. "Probably not," Mrs. Petrov admitted. "But is it right?" That's a different question. Elara was still absorbing that when Leo appeared at the kitchen door. "There's something you should see," he said. "Follow me." He led her upstairs, to a study lined with shelves. There was an antique desk, heavy curtains, and an old globe in the corner. The air was thick with Richard's memory. This was his, Leo said. He kept everything here. He opened a drawer and pulled out a leather portfolio, worn at the corners. Inside were folders, 7 in total, each labeled with a child's name. Marcus, Serafina, Clara, Chloe, Finn, Lily, Leo. Elara opened Leo's file first. Inside were photos of Leo, thin as bone, sleeping beneath a bridge. A social worker's report. A failed placement. And Richard's notes, neat, methodical, full of pain. Leo, age 12. Multiple foster placements. Last placement, abuse allegations not pursued. Fearful of adults. Extremely protective of younger children. She turned the page. He asked me if I wanted anything in return for shelter. I said no. He didn't believe me. Not at first. More documents followed, school records, vaccination updates, letters Richard had written to himself about progress, setbacks, moments of growth. Elara flipped through each folder, and the picture became clear. Each child had come from something broken. And Richard, quietly, methodically, had picked up the pieces. She closed the final folder, Lily's, and looked up at Leo. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked, voice hoarse. "Because you asked if we were his kids," Leo said simply. "And I wanted you to know, maybe not by blood. But yeah, we were his. He saved us. Everyone." The air hung heavy with truth. Elara sat back in Richard's old chair, emotion tightening her chest. "He couldn't give me the child I wanted," she whispered. "But he gave me something else." Leo didn't respond. He didn't need to. She looked at the portfolio in her lap, proof of Richard's secret life, and now, her unexpected inheritance. Not just the house. Not just the memories. But the legacy of a man who had spent his final years building a home for the forgotten. And now, it was up to her to decide what came next. It was late morning when the storm came, not from the sky, but from the gravel driveway. Elara stood in the parlor of Oak Haven, reviewing Richard's carefully kept files when she heard the crunch of tires. She peeked through the tall window, heart clenching at the sight of a sleek black Mercedes pulling up with all the arrogance of someone who already owned the place. Out stepped a man in a tailored navy suit and sunglasses far too expensive for Vermont farmland. His posture screamed entitlement. His confidence, unearned. His face? Instantly familiar from a photo Elara had seen in Richard's study, Bartholomew Vance. Cousin. Banker. Opportunist. Leo appeared beside her like a shadow. "That him?" he asked flatly. Elara nodded. "That's him." The doorbell rang. Not once. Not twice. Just once, sharp, loud, impatient. "I'll handle it," Elara said quietly. She opened the door to find Bartholomew already halfway through removing his gloves like a man preparing to dissect something unpleasant. He offered no handshake. No smile. "Ah. You must be Elara," he said, his tone clipped and cool. Richard's ex-wife. The pause before ex-wife wasn't accidental. "Yes," she replied evenly. "And you must be Bartholomew Vance. Cousin. Banker. Professional intruder?" His smirk flickered. "Cute." He stepped past her without being invited in, scanning the grand foyer with disdain. "Well," he sighed, "it's exactly as I imagined. Outdated. Overgrown. Expensive to maintain. But prime for liquidation. You came to admire the architecture?" Elara asked, following him into the drawing room. "I came," he said, spinning slowly in place, to prevent a tragedy. Behind him, children gathered in the hallway, Leo at the front, the others stacked behind him like a protective wall. Bartholomew noticed them, his expression souring. Ah, yes. The collection, he said, waving a hand as if gesturing towards stray cats. I see they're still here. They live here, Elara corrected. Richard wanted them to stay. He also wanted to be a jazz pianist once, Bartholomew sneered. Not every fantasy deserves to become legally binding. Leo stepped forward. We're not going anywhere. Bartholomew raised an eyebrow. And you are? Leo. Well, Leo, he said, tone patronizing, this property is part of Richard's estate, which I intend to challenge in probate court. As his closest blood relative, I have grounds. Especially given the questionable mental state he was in during the final months of his life. He was of sound mind, Elara snapped. That's debatable, Bartholomew said smoothly. Leaving a multi-million-dollar estate to his ex-wife? And handing over occupancy to a ragtag group of undocumented minors? The court will have concerns. As they should. He turned back to Elara. I'm prepared to offer a solution. Sell the property. Quietly. No drawn-out litigation. I'll pay generously, market rate plus 10%. You walk away with millions. And these children, he shrugged. They'll be placed in proper care. Foster care? Leo said bitterly. If necessary, Bartholomew said without shame. Certainly a better alternative to playing Lord of the Flies in a collapsing estate. Elara's jaw clenched. You talk about them like they're pests. Like they don't matter. They're not your responsibility, he said. Nor were they Richard's. Not legally. There are no papers. No guardianship. Just a dying man's emotional delusions and your nostalgia. Behind her, she felt the heat of 7 frightened stares. They're not squatters, she said quietly but firmly. They're children. They're a family. This house is their home. Bartholomew smiled coldly. Not for long. My attorneys will be in touch. He pulled a sleek silver card from his pocket and placed it on the fireplace mantel like a final insult. Then he left, without saying goodbye, without looking back. Only the slam of the door punctuated his exit. The silence afterward was unbearable. Serafina was the first to speak. Her voice was barely above a whisper. He's going to try to take it from us. He'll try, Elara admitted. But he's not going to win. How can you be sure? Marcus asked, adjusting his glasses nervously. He's rich. He has lawyers. We don't even have papers. We have something better, Elara said. What? Leo asked. We have Richard's intent, she said, holding up the files. We have documentation. Journals. Records. A history. We have proof that Richard cared for each of you, and proof that this place wasn't just a house. It was a sanctuary. She exhaled slowly. But we're going to need help. From who? Chloe asked. Elara's eyes settled on Leo. Someone who knows these children. Who believes in them. And a lawyer willing to fight like hell. Leo nodded slowly. Then we'd better find one. Agreed, Elara said. That night, she sat in the same chair Richard used to occupy, reading over his handwritten notes, letting her fingertips trace the indentations of his pen. The man she once loved hadn't abandoned her. He'd turned heartbreak into purpose. And now, she would do the same. Bartholomew had money. He had power. He had the law on his side. But Elara? Elara had fire. And 7 very good reasons to fight. Elara sat alone in Richard's study as the evening light slanted across the bookshelves, painting the room in gold and shadow. The house was quiet now, too quiet. The children had retreated to their rooms after dinner, and Mrs. Petrov had long since gone home. Only the ticking of the grandfather clock kept her company, each second a steady reminder that time was moving forward, whether she was ready or not. On the desk in front of her lay the leather-bound journal. Richard's journal. She had flipped through most of it already, reading his neat handwriting, his precise notes. Each entry was a mix of love and strategy. He wasn't just documenting the children's medical appointments or their grades, he was writing down how many times Finn flinched when someone raised their voice, or how Serafina stopped drawing for a month after a nightmare. There were scribbles in the margins. Lily finally smiled. Leo fixed the radiator by himself. Marcus used a big word correctly and beamed when I noticed. These weren't just notes. They were love letters. To the life Richard had built after her. And to the family they never could. She leaned back, staring at the ceiling, trying to process what all of this meant. For years, she had believed that the loss of a child had destroyed their marriage. She blamed herself for not being able to carry a pregnancy to term, and when the silence grew too loud between them, she left, thinking Richard would move on, maybe remarry, maybe heal. Instead, he built Oak Haven. He didn't move on. He doubled down. He created the life they never had, just not with her. Elara wasn't angry. That's what surprised her most. She thought she would be. She thought she'd feel betrayed, or jealous, or hollow. But instead, she felt complicated. Like a part of her heart that had been numb for years had suddenly thawed, and now she didn't know what to do with the flood of feelings rushing in. She hadn't just lost a marriage. She'd lost a dream. And now, in the strangest twist of fate, she was standing in the middle of it. 7 children upstairs. 1 angry cousin at the gate. And a house full of ghosts. She stood and wandered toward the fireplace, where Bartholomew had left his business card earlier. She picked it up, stared at the embossed name. He was offering money. Millions. She could take it. Walk away. Let the state figure out what to do with the kids. That would be the logical thing to do. But not the right thing. Because when Lily asked her if she was going to make them leave, she had answered from her gut. Not her head. And that answer hadn't changed. This wasn't about Richard anymore. It was about the living. She walked to the window and looked out over the lawn, where the swing set still stood, one of its chains held together with duct tape. She thought of Leo, silently repairing it 2 days ago, saying nothing, asking for nothing. She thought of Serafina's eyes when she sketched. Of Marcus, rattling off facts about black holes while making pancakes. Of the twins whispering and giggling even in the face of fear. Of Finn, with a wrench in his hand and dirt on his cheeks, proudly showing her how he fixed a broken chair leg. Of Lily, pressing a crayon drawing into her palm, whispering, "I hope you stay." They were fractured. Damaged. But they were also beautiful. And she couldn't walk away. Not now. Her phone buzzed on the table. A text from Patricia Winters, Richard's old attorney. "Call me tomorrow. I believe we can stop Bartholomew before he starts. There's more Richard left for you than you realize." Elara put the phone down. She didn't need more time. She needed purpose. This was it. Oak Haven wasn't just Richard's redemption. It might be hers too. The next morning, she didn't wait for the kids to find her. She gathered them in the kitchen, still sleepy-eyed, hair sticking up, mismatched pajamas. They looked at her with a mix of curiosity and cautious hope. "I have something to say," she told them, her voice calm but steady. "I didn't come here to find a family. I didn't expect any of this. I came because Richard left me a house, and I thought that was it. But it wasn't." She looked around at each of their faces, all so different, all somehow connected. "He left me you. And I can't pretend I understand everything he did, or how, or why. But I do understand this, you belong here. Together. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that doesn't change." Leo raised an eyebrow. You're staying? I'm staying, she said. Even if Bartholomew sues? I've got a lawyer. He'll fight dirty, Marcus added. I read about guys like him. So will I, Elara replied. I'm not afraid of him. Lily stepped forward. Her voice, so small, carried the biggest words. Are you our mom now? Elara didn't cry, not yet. But her throat tightened like a fist. I don't know if I've earned that, she said, kneeling to eye level. But if you'll let me, I'd like to try. The little girl wrapped her arms around Elara's neck and whispered, okay. Just like that, it was decided. Not in court. Not with paperwork. But in that kitchen, over burnt toast and orange juice. The moment a woman chose love over fear. And chose to become something she'd spent her whole life believing was out of reach. A mother. The sun filtered softly through the hallway windows as Elara followed Leo up the staircase, her fingers grazing the carved wooden rail her ex-husband must have touched thousands of times. They passed bedroom doors, some cracked open to reveal glimpses of drawings, books, hand-me-down blankets. It was still so surreal. She had expected an empty house. Instead, she had found lives, half-hidden, fully human. Leo stopped at the end of the hall, in front of what looked like a linen closet. You need to see something, he said. He reached behind a stack of folded towels and pressed something. A soft click sounded. The back wall swung open. Behind it, a narrow passage, barely wide enough to walk through. He led her in. It wasn't dark, small skylights lined the ceiling, and the room opened up into something like a hidden study. A sanctuary of secrets. There were bulletin boards filled with notes, maps, photos, timelines. Shelves of locked files. A desk covered in manila folders. The air was heavy, not with dust, but with intention. This wasn't a room someone stumbled into. This was where plans were made. Where Richard had worked, quietly, urgently, to change lives. Elara turned in place slowly, eyes scanning the walls. It wasn't random. One section was labeled Leo. Another Serafina. Another Marcus. All 7 children had a space, photos from when Richard found them, handwritten assessments, notations like response to music or hasn't spoken in 19 days. It was heartbreaking. And meticulous. He hadn't just rescued them. He had built a system. A private counterweight to the broken foster care system he clearly no longer trusted. He said this room was for when the world asks questions, Leo said quietly. Said if anyone ever tried to take us, the truth would be in here. Elara opened a folder. It was Clara and Chloe's. A caseworker report from 3 years ago described their living situation as hazardous, listing signs of neglect and suspected abuse by their mother's boyfriend. The file noted, placement pending, potential sibling separation due to age and capacity. Then came Richard's notes. Found them in an abandoned laundromat. Told them it was temporary. They cried when I said I had a house big enough for both. Elara covered her mouth. Every folder was the same. Government forms abandoned in cold bureaucracy, and then Richard's warm, aching handwriting filling in the gaps. Notes about nightmares. Favorite meals. Academic progress. First real birthday, first time sleeping through the night, first time saying I feel safe. It was more than documentation. It was evidence of love. Leo pulled open a drawer and handed her a sealed envelope. Her name, Elara, was scrawled in familiar handwriting on the front. He told me to give this to you when the time was right, Leo said. She hesitated, her fingers trembling as she broke the seal. Inside, a letter. The ink was shaky, inconsistent. She recognized Richard's voice instantly, even in silence. My dearest Elara. If you're reading this, I'm gone. And you found Oak Haven. You deserve an explanation. This place, it started with Leo. I wasn't looking to change the world. I was just trying to help one scared kid. But one turned into two, then three, and I couldn't stop. I didn't want to. I couldn't save our marriage, Elle. I couldn't give you the family we dreamed of. But I found a way to give that dream to someone else. These children, they're not mine by blood. But they're mine by heart. They're everything I wanted to give you and couldn't. And now I'm asking you for one last thing: protect them. You have the strength I never did. The compassion I always admired. I've left everything to you. Because you're the only person I trust to carry this forward. I hope one day, you'll understand. With love, Richard. By the time she finished reading, Elara's tears had soaked the corner of the page. She folded the letter and placed it gently in her coat pocket, next to her heart. She turned to Leo, who was standing silently, watching her with those two old eyes. He loved you, Leo said. He didn't talk about it much, but near the end, he told us stories. About you. He said you had the kindest soul of anyone he'd ever known. Elara nodded, wiping her face with the back of her hand. I wasn't sure what he saw in me until I saw all this. Leo stepped closer. So what now? We finish what he started, she said. But legally. No more hiding. We protect Oak Haven, and all of you, the right way. Leo didn't smile. But his shoulders softened. I'll help, he said. I know, Elara replied. They stood in the center of Richard's secret sanctuary, one built with heartbreak and hope, and for the first time in years, Elara felt like she wasn't looking backward anymore. She was standing in the middle of something that mattered. And this time, she wasn't going to walk away. The courthouse loomed like something out of a John Grisham novel: marble pillars, heavy oak doors, and the suffocating weight of judgment hanging in the air. Elara had driven through the early morning fog with her hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than she cared to admit. Her hair was neatly pulled back. Her makeup was subtle but intentional. Today was about strength, not style. Outside, waiting on the steps, stood Patricia Winters, Richard's longtime attorney. She was sharp-eyed, cool-tempered, and dressed like someone who had never lost a case and didn't intend to start now. You ready? Patricia asked, offering a brief smile. Elara exhaled. Not even a little. That's okay, Patricia said. I'm ready enough for both of us. They walked into the courtroom together, flanked by file folders, legal pads, and copies of Richard's handwritten letters and documentation. On the other side of the aisle sat Bartholomew Vance, immaculately groomed, flanked by two attorneys with shark-like smiles. He looked at Elara with a glance that said, "You're out of your depth." But she didn't flinch. She couldn't afford to. The judge, an older woman with intelligent eyes and no time for theatrics, called the hearing to order. We're here to determine the emergency guardianship petition filed by Ms. Elara Jennings on behalf of 7 minor children residing at Oak Haven Manor. Bartholomew's lawyer went first. He painted the children as squatters. Said Richard had been in decline. Questioned Elara's motives, her capacity, her emotional stability. They said it all in polite, careful language. But the implication was clear. She was an outsider. A librarian. A lonely woman clinging to someone else's broken dream. Patricia rose without flinching. We'd like to submit Mr. Jennings' journals. Detailed records of each child, how they were found, what care was provided, and most importantly, what progress they've made at Oak Haven. And, she said, turning deliberately, we have statements from each child, written in their own words. Elara watched as the bailiff passed the judge a stack of colorful folders, each one labeled with a child's name. Inside, stories of survival, pain, belonging, and hope. Then it was Elara's turn to testify. She stood, hands clenched tightly in front of her. and spoke. "Your Honor, I didn't come to Oak Haven expecting any of this. I thought I was inheriting a house. What I found was a family, one Richard created, not with legal paperwork, but with love and intention." She paused, gathering herself. "These children have already been abandoned, neglected, hurt by people who were supposed to protect them. Richard gave them shelter, structure, and, somehow, a sense of home. Now that he's gone, they're terrified that it's going to be taken away." The judge leaned forward slightly. "You were married to Mr. Jennings over a decade ago. Why are you stepping in now?" "Because someone has to," Elara said, voice steady. "Because I couldn't be the mother Richard and I once hoped for, but now, maybe I can be the guardian these children need. Not just out of guilt, but out of love. Because I see them. I know them. And I won't let them be broken again." Patricia nodded subtly from the table. The judge scribbled notes. Bartholomew stood suddenly. "Your Honor, I must object. This is highly emotional." The judge didn't look up. "Good. These are children. I expect emotion when someone's asking to raise 7 of them." He sat down, visibly irritated. Then Patricia delivered the final blow, Lily's drawing. A crayon sketch of a mother bird sheltering 7 chicks under her wings, with Oak Haven Manor in the background. At the bottom, in blocky, uncertain letters, "Our home. Our family. Please let us stay." The judge stared at the image for a long time. The silence was deafening. "I'm taking this matter under advisement," she finally said. "I will deliver my ruling tomorrow morning." The courtroom emptied quickly. Bartholomew passed Elara on the way out and stopped just long enough to whisper, "One day of sentiment doesn't beat a lifetime of law." Elara turned to him, steady. "Maybe not. But love beats money. Every single time." That night, back at Oak Haven, the kids tried not to ask, but their eyes said it all. Elara knelt down in the kitchen and told them the truth. "We don't know yet. But we gave it everything we had." Serafina placed a sketchbook in her lap, her latest drawing, all 8 of them on the front porch, with Elara at the center. Leo looked at her and asked, "If we lose, what happens?" She paused. Then said, "Then we fight again. And again. And again. Until we don't lose." And this time, they believed her. The next morning, Patricia called at 7:12 a.m. The judge had ruled in their favor. Emergency guardianship, granted. The children wouldn't be separated. Not now. Not yet. Oak Haven was still theirs. The kitchen exploded in cheers and laughter and more than a few tears. Even Leo, stoic, shielded Leo, let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. And Elara? She just smiled. Because this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. They say sometimes it only takes one moment to tip the scale. For Elara Jennings, it wasn't a legal argument, or a witness, or even Richard's meticulous files that ultimately swayed the courtroom. It was a drawing. Crayon on printer paper. 8 inches by 11. Folded twice, carefully, with a crease down the middle like something precious. The judge held it with both hands, gently, as if the paper might shatter from too much force. At the center of the page was a large mother bird, her wings wide, curved protectively over 7 small birds, each drawn in different colors. Beneath them stood a familiar stone house, Oak Haven Manor, rendered in crooked lines and wobbly windows, but unmistakable. The sky was blue. The grass was bright. The sun, naturally, smiled in the corner. But it was the words at the bottom that made time stop in the courtroom. Our home. Our family. Please let us stay. The judge went very quiet. No one dared speak. Patricia glanced at Elara and offered the faintest nod. This is everything. Bartholomew's team looked visibly uncomfortable, like wolves caught under a child's gaze. They couldn't cross-examine innocence. Couldn't file a motion against raw, unfiltered hope. The judge cleared her throat, her voice softer now. Who drew this? Elara didn't need to look. Lily, she said. The youngest. The judge stared at the picture another moment. Then gently set it aside, on top of the evidence pile, not underneath. That was when the shift happened. A ruling wouldn't be delivered until the next morning. But everyone in that courtroom, attorneys, clerks, even Bartholomew, knew it had already been decided. It wasn't just about legal guardianship anymore. It was about belonging. Back at Oak Haven, the energy was different. The children didn't know the ruling yet. But they felt it. Lily clung to Elara's side that evening, whispering questions into her sleeve. Do we have to go? No, Elara said softly. Not tonight. And maybe not ever. They gathered in the drawing room, the one with the broken windows still patched with plastic. It didn't matter. The warmth came from inside. The kids spread blankets across the floor, turning the space into an impromptu slumber party. Serafina passed around sketchpads. Marcus brought down a box of puzzles. Finn bounced between everyone, too excited to sit still. Leo was the last to join. He stood in the doorway for a while, like he was measuring the room. Measuring her. Then, finally, he spoke. You're really staying. It wasn't a question. More like a confirmation he needed to hear himself say out loud. I am, Elara answered. For good. He nodded once. Then walked over, sat beside her on the armrest of Richard's old chair, and stared into the fire like it held answers. I never thought someone would fight for us. Elara placed her hand gently over his. I didn't know I needed you until I met you. Lily crawled onto her lap, still holding a fistful of crayons. Did the judge like my picture? I think, Elara whispered, brushing hair from the little girl's forehead, your picture reminded her what family really means. That night, no one wanted to sleep in their own bed. Not out of fear, but solidarity. They made a cocoon in the drawing room, a tangle of pillows, quilts, and legs draped over armrests. Elara stayed in the middle of it all, awake long after the children drifted off one by one. Her thoughts were quiet but sure. They weren't Richard's kids. They weren't hers by blood. But somehow, they were hers now. By choice. By fight. By love. The next morning, the phone rang at 7:03 a.m. It was Patricia. Elara, she said, it's official. Emergency guardianship granted. Elara sat down slowly, her hand pressed against her chest. All seven? All seven. Together. In your care. Oak Haven is theirs, for now, at least. Elara didn't speak for a moment. Her eyes welled up, and her voice cracked. Thank you. You should be thanking Lily, Patricia said, a smile in her voice. That drawing did more than a dozen court filings ever could. Elara hung up and turned around to find the children standing behind her, barefoot, bedhead, and waiting. She didn't say a word. She just smiled. And they knew. Finn threw his arms in the air and shouted, "We're staying." The twins screamed. Marcus spun in a circle. Serafina let out a breath she'd been holding for days. Even Leo broke into the first full smile she'd ever seen on him. Lily ran to Elara and whispered into her shoulder, "I knew my bird mom would work." Elara laughed through the tears. "Me too, sweetheart." Later that day, Elara walked through the halls of Oak Haven, a clipboard in hand and Lily tagging along at her side. There was a lot to do: get the heating system inspected, call a carpenter, stock the pantry, look into school options. But first, she walked to the front entryway. Serafina had been working quietly all morning. She'd just finished hanging something up. Elara stepped closer. It was a new portrait. All 8 of them, sitting on the front porch steps of Oak Haven, Elara in the center, surrounded by 7 kids. Behind them, in faint, soft lines, was a figure in the doorway. Richard. Smiling. Watching. And just beside it, Serafina had framed Lily's crayon drawing. A mother bird. 7 chicks. A house. A family. Not born, but built. Together. The snow had started to melt by the time the roof was finally repaired. It was the first of many projects, long overdue, half-finished jobs Richard had probably intended to complete before his health failed. Elara stood at the edge of the property that spring morning, arms crossed, watching as contractors hauled in lumber and supplies. The roofers nodded to her like she belonged. And for the first time in a long time, she believed it too. Inside, Oak Haven buzzed with a different kind of energy. Real light streamed in through clean windows. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon rolls and lemon cleaner. The pantry was stocked. The furnace ran without coughing. The front porch no longer sagged under the weight of years in silence. Life was coming back, one brick at a time. But it wasn't just the house that was changing. It was the people inside. Elara had always imagined motherhood as something that began with a positive pregnancy test. Something announced with joy, showered with gifts. She never imagined it would look like learning how to braid twin girls' hair before sunrise. Or staying up late to comfort a teenager through his first panic attack. Or helping a 5-year-old write her name in pink marker on every surface in the house. But here she was. Not trying to be anyone's replacement. Just being there. And that, apparently, was enough. Marcus was the first to start calling her mom. It slipped out over breakfast one morning. "Mom, can we go to the library this weekend?" Silence fell like a dropped plate. Marcus's eyes widened. Elara blinked. Then smiled. "Of course," she said, acting like it was nothing, even though it felt like everything. Serafina never said it aloud, but Elara found it later, written on the back of a sketch. A pencil drawing of the kitchen, with Elara standing at the stove, surrounded by kids in chaos and color. Underneath it, in tiny lettering. Home. Mom. Clara and Chloe made it a competition, who could say mom the most in a single sentence. Finn started using it only when he needed something fixed or when he was in trouble. And Leo? Leo waited the longest. But one night, after a particularly hard conversation about his past, one filled with bruises he didn't show, he knocked on her door and simply said, "Good night, Mom." Then walked away. She didn't call him back. She just sat on the edge of her bed and cried. Each child's healing looked different. Marcus thrived in structure. Elara helped enroll him in the advanced middle school program in town, and every afternoon he came home bursting with science facts and debate team gossip. Serafina needed space and art. Elara converted one of the spare rooms into a studio with proper lighting and real supplies. Some days Serafina barely spoke, but her sketches said volumes. One entire wall became a growing mural, their family story in charcoal and color. The twins joined a youth theater program. Elara watched from the back row as Clara played Juliet and Chloe played Mercutio, because of course they refused to be cast as sisters. Finn became the unofficial handyman of Oak Haven. Elara helped him set up a tiny workshop in the old garden shed. He spent hours dismantling broken radios, light fixtures, anything she allowed him to touch. One afternoon, he fixed the antique grandfather clock in the hall. The chimes rang for the first time in years. And Lily. Lily bloomed slowly. She still had bad nights. Still clung to Elara's sleeve when strangers came too close. But she started speaking more. Laughing. Drawing. And once, while tucking her into bed, Elara whispered, "Sweet dreams, baby girl." And Lily whispered back, "Night-night, Mommy." Leo was the most complicated. At 16, he carried himself like a soldier, always alert, always ready for war. He'd spent years raising the others, protecting them when no adult would. Trust didn't come easily. But it came, eventually, in pieces. One night, they sat on the porch together. He tossed a basketball between his hands, avoiding eye contact. "You know, I used to play," he said. "In school? Before everything. Before the system. Would you want to play again?" He shrugged. "Maybe." So Elara signed him up for the local rec league. Bought him new sneakers. And went to every game, even when he pretended not to care. He cared. And when he sank his first three-pointer, he glanced at the bleachers and smiled. In quiet moments, Elara would walk the halls alone. Touch the worn banister Richard had once gripped. Run her fingers along the baseboards the children had scribbled on with crayons. This place, once filled with Richard's secrets, was now filled with purpose. One evening, she found a velvet box in the back of his desk drawer. Inside, a locket. Antique gold. Inside, a photo of the two of them on their wedding day, her hair pinned up, his smile easy and free. Etched inside the locket was one word. Hope. She clasped it around her neck, pressing it to her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "For choosing me. For trusting me with them." And in the silence, she swore she could almost hear his voice again, low and soft. "They were always meant to be yours too." Oak Haven was no longer just a manor. It was a home. Not perfect. Not quiet. Not easy. But real. And every time one of the kids ran into her arms. Every time they whispered, "Mom." Elara felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Whole. The courthouse looked smaller this time. Not because it had changed, but because Elara had. She wasn't the hesitant woman who walked in months ago, unsure of her role, unsure of her right to even stand before a judge. Now, she walked with her shoulders back, a small hand gripping each of hers, Clara on one side, Lily on the other. The rest of the kids trailed behind like a mismatched parade of hope and resilience, their presence commanding more than any legal brief ever could. Patricia Winters met them on the courthouse steps, holding a thick leather folder that contained everything they'd built: documentation, home evaluations, school reports, therapy notes, and most importantly, 7 letters, one from each child, handwritten, folded carefully, and signed with trembling but determined strokes. "Today's the day," Patricia said, her voice warm. "You ready?" Elara smiled, not with nerves, but with certainty. "We already won. This is just the paperwork." Inside the courtroom, the same judge presided, but this time her face softened the moment she saw Elara. She nodded toward the children seated in the gallery, dressed in their best, eyes wide, hands fidgeting in laps. Patricia opened the case with poise and clarity. She spoke of the transformation Oak Haven had undergone, not just structurally, but emotionally. She presented charts showing Marcus's academic acceleration, Serafina's art awards, Leo's team MVP plaque. She cited therapist reports confirming stability, progress, trust. And then, Elara took the stand. Her voice didn't shake. She told the court about pancake breakfasts and late-night nightmares. About broken furniture and fixed hearts. About crayons on the walls and band-aids on bruised knees. About the first time each of them had called her mom. "I didn't give birth to them," she said simply. "But I choose them. Every day. And I will keep choosing them, for as long as they'll let me." The courtroom was still. Even Bartholomew wasn't there. After losing the emergency guardianship case, and watching public support for Elara swell around the small town like wildfire, he'd quietly retreated, his legal challenges reduced to a paper-thin echo of what they once were. The judge reviewed the final file, glanced over Lily's original drawing once more, now framed in the folder with a label that read Exhibit G, Statement of Emotional Attachment, and cleared her throat. Having reviewed the evidence, she said, it is the finding of this court that Elara Jennings is not only qualified but uniquely suited to serve as the legal guardian of the 7 minors currently residing at Oak Haven Manor. She paused. The petition for permanent guardianship is hereby granted. For a moment, the room held its breath. Then Clara screamed, yes. Finn jumped to his feet, pumping his fists in the air. Marcus burst into tears. Leo said nothing, but the way he leaned back in his chair and exhaled said everything. Elara sat in silence, stunned, a smile blooming slowly on her face like spring pushing through frozen soil. She had done it. They had done it. They were a family now. Legally. Eternally. That night, Oak Haven glowed. The kitchen hummed with celebration. Cupcakes. Streamers. A paper crown someone made out of a cereal box and tinfoil labeled Queen Mom. The fireplace crackled, and Serafina unveiled her latest masterpiece, a large canvas that now hung above the front entryway. The portrait showed all 8 of them sitting on the steps of the manor. Elara at the center, her arms around Lily and Leo. Clara and Chloe grinning. Marcus holding a book. Serafina with a pencil behind her ear. Finn balancing a wrench on one finger like a magic trick. And just behind them, partially faded but unmistakably present, Richard. Painted in soft tones, standing in the doorway, watching over them with a smile that said, I knew this was possible all along. Below the painting, in careful script, Serafina had added just one word. Family. Later, after the cake was gone and the little ones had fallen asleep on the rug, Elara stepped onto the front porch. The spring air was cool and sweet. Leo joined her, hands in his hoodie pocket, looking out at the moonlit lawn. We really get to stay, he said. You do, she replied. Forever, if you'll have me. He didn't respond right away. Just nodded. Then he said something he hadn't said before. Thanks, Mom. She turned to look at him, and in the soft porch light, she saw it. That lost boy she met on day 1 was gone. In his place was a young man becoming who he was always meant to be. A protector. A brother. A son. She reached over, gave his hand a quick squeeze, and whispered back, thank you for letting me try. And inside, near the base of the stairs, Lily had placed something else beneath the family portrait. The locket Richard had given Elara. The one engraved with a single word. Hope. It sat in a glass box, quietly glowing under the soft hallway light, a symbol of where they'd come from and what they had chosen to become. Because families aren't just made in hospitals or courthouses. Sometimes, they're built in kitchens and bedrooms and porches. Through burnt toast and bedtime stories. Through broken windows and whispered promises. Sometimes, a family isn't something you're born into. It's something you fight for. And at Oak Haven Manor, that fight had ended, not in a courtroom, but in love.